Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. Have you ever noticed that the edge of hay meadows are usually overgrown with all kinds of scrub? So in this video, I want to talk about how pigs can open that area back up, help you reclaim it so you can expand your hay fields and produce a great tasting product at the end of hay season. So come along, let's talk about it. So it amazes me how much of an issue this is on farms throughout Appalachia that I've visited, either doing assessments or just checking them out. There always seems to be a very rough edge to the hayfield or even the pasture area where people have ruminants. And that edge seems to, year after year, creep in to the meadows a little bit more. So in many cases, those edges are left rough intentionally. And here's some common reasons why. In some cases, it can just simply be a maneuverability issue, being able to maneuver around trees on the pasture edge or ditches like we have here. Sometimes it's a safety issue like steep slopes or breakaway banks like I have right here near our creek crossing. It's best not to have a piece of equipment close by where the ground could give way and you go tumbling over the hill. It could be that the person cutting hay is just trying to save on his equipment because those edges can hide things like rogue posts or some old fence or even stumps and some other elements they just can't see. So they move over with their cutting equipment and leave that buffer just to keep from tearing up their equipment. Hay cutting equipment is really expensive and it doesn't take much to knock something out of line. Another reason can be because of invasive plants or plants they just don't want mixed up in the hay, like greenbrier or blackberry or autumn olive, some of those more woody stems that make hay really undesirable if they end up in a bale. Well, another reason why hay cutters leave a buffer is really just based on the equipment. If you're familiar with hay cutting equipment, the cutters are usually offset to one side of the tractor, usually to the right side. And ideally, you don't want to drive your tractor through the hay you're about to cut. So as you do your first cut, you usually have this sacrificial lane that you're driving through as your sickle bar or your rotary cutter cuts the good hay. So you do that border all the way around the hay field, tramming down or trampling down that first section, undesirable, and then you're cutting what you really want to have that you're not going to be driving over. And I think another reason that is very legitimate for ecology purposes is wildlife habitat. Sometimes these areas produce really good habitat for turkey and grouse and woodcock and other small ground birds. What I find interesting about this whole buffer, however, is it appears, especially in the properties I've been on, that buffer just gets larger and larger. It creeps into the meadow more and more over time. And the reason why, at least here in central West Virginia we see a lot of, is the hay cutter isn't usually the property owner. Here in West Virginia, we have so many old farms that have laid fallow for so long that they're actually reverting back to Appalachian hardwood. But sometimes the property owners will say, hey, you can have all the hay in the meadow if you just keep it cut and keep it clear. So the guy bringing his equipment in, of course, is going to want to process the hay as quickly as possible, efficiently as possible, and without damaging anything. So just out of natural equipment preservation needs, moving over to say, well, I'm not really quite sure what's growing there, or there's some saplings coming in, or, hey, I've only cut this once this year, so instead of getting a second or third cutting, I haven't been able to keep the edges clear, so the invasives and undesirable, the more woody plants are moving into the pasture. So those buffer edges can just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and cause you to lose hay production. Rarely do you see guys coming in at the end of hay season with a brush hog or a forestry mulcher and taking those edges all the way down. So instead of bringing that equipment in and spending tons of money on equipment purchase, equipment rental, and the diesel you go through to run it all, and then even be challenged by super steep slopes that you don't feel safe running that equipment on, my suggestion would be introduce pigs to this area. And not only can you get your margins open back up, but you can also produce great pork product with all the forage that they're going to have access to. Placing pigs in this area is very efficient and very economical, even more so than goats. When it comes to fencing, just use temporary fencing with a single strand of electric like we have here and all around our pastures. Fence posts are cheap, single strand of electric super cheap, and they can easily be taken up if hay cutting needs to be done. With the quality of solar energizers these days, you can place electric fence anywhere, even if you're not close to grid power. And once you put the pigs in here, they're going to start working down these edges. This edge used to be covered in greenbrier, and you can see here the one last autumn olive that's left Why it looks like a tree is because they have stripped it completely down from snout height all the way to the ground. So something like this, I can just easily come back by with a chainsaw and lop it off, and we're good to go. If you have a specific stubborn area that has a lot of overgrown brambles and brush in it, then one trick you can do is throw field corn down in those areas, and that will encourage the pigs to really concentrate heavily in that area and do as much ground disturbance as possible to extract every kernel of corn. This area here used to be nothing but multiflora rows, and we've had pigs in this area now for almost 10 years. There's not a single multiflora rose bush anywhere. In fact, if you followed the channel for a while, this area used to have a lot of debris, we'll call it, from the previous owners, and the pigs would unearth different pieces of garbage or whatever, so it allowed me to pick it up easy and dispose of it. So they were not only helping us reclaim this area of ground, but they're also helping us clean it up so we can get the garbage off of it. So this section of pasture is laid fallow for 2 years. I haven't had pigs on it for 2 years, and we're just now seeing autumn olive start to come back. So this spring when we bring pigs in, they'll get to spend time over here. So there are some variables that will come into play when you're introducing pigs to this area, like how bad is the underbrush, how many acres, or what's the size of the ground we're talking about you're trying to reclaim, and of course, how many pigs are you willing to put in there and manage. That will really determine how quickly they can clear the land, how much ground you can cover, and how fast you need to move them in their life cycle. I think pigs are a great option for these fringe areas on farms, simply because the very nature of a pig, the ability of a pig to be able to use its face to eat and uproot a lot of plants and underbrush that we want to clear out. The simple fact that their life cycle from birth to processing weight is usually 6 to 8 months, depending on breed. So that aligns great with hay season. You can put weaned piglets out in these areas in the springtime, and the time you're putting up your third cutting, they'll be ready to go to the processor. In a little as a year or two, you may be able to open up the hay meadow to be much wider, as wide as it was at one point, because the pigs have done such a great job clearing all this area out. Or, what I think you'll find is that raising pigs is a great addition to your farm operation, and depending on the scale, you can add more pigs in these fringe areas and just keep them there, moving them around so they don't overtax the ground, and they could become a great profit center for your farm business. When you look at the life cycle of the pig, the ease in keeping them contained, low predation, low disease issues, and pound for pound the amount of meat you get in the short life cycle, they're hands down the ideal animal to have on any farm, and especially in these undesirable areas that nothing else is going to want to spend time in. It's funny, in the 10 plus years we've had pigs here on this piece of property, it's difficult for me to find examples to show on our land to do this video topic, simply because anywhere that I have pasture edge, anything that's desirable as grass, I don't have any overgrowth or any of those rough edges because I've deliberately put pigs on them to keep it all knocked down. But with the property assessments I've been doing, I see more and more of that, and especially the one I did recently. In fact, if you watch last week's video, you'll see the details of this assessment. But I want to kind of do a double click on that property in southern PA and show the specific areas, these buffer areas that they have around hay production, because the hay was being cut by somebody off farm, and they were doing just that. They were moving in more and more to protect their equipment or to be able to put hay up quicker. And it really created these big, thick, overgrown areas. And so as this family goes to move on this property, I want to show some details of what they can do to really maximize that ground and produce a great farm product for their family. So in southern Pennsylvania, this little over 40-acre tract is what we walked last week and did an assessment on. And there you can see there's a lot of hay meadow here. This spot where you see the tracks there to the left of the screen is an elevated knoll. Not the greatest soil, but able to produce decent hay there. And you see as you get down the slope, closer to our truck, closer to the round bales piled up there, you see a little more greenery as you get down to better soil, better moisture. Obviously the frosted plate into the top there as well. So there's an area there in the central part of the screen where the hay cutters just kept coming in further and further. And so that underbrush kept growing and growing. A lot of autumn olive there, a lot of blackberry, greenbrier, just a lot of things growing in. So that's a prime candidate for them to be able to place pigs. So here's a great shot of just showing how thick that undergrowth is. You can see all the greenbrier saplings coming in, all the different grasses. I mean, the greenbrier thickets were just super, super dense. And just a lot of ground that's lost due to this undergrowth. Now, you get in here with a forestry mulcher and clean all this up, but it's going to take thousands of dollars. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for equipment damage and just a big expense, and you're still going to have to combat that growing back. You're not going to go straight to hay production right after that. So I want to take one section of their farm and just do a quick breakout of what I think would work great and the amount of work that you'd have to put into it. So I've got this section here. This is one of probably 6 different locations they can do this. In fact, the entire woods on the South Ridge there, you could do this because the amount of underbrush there is substantial. But if we just took this one section, the first thing I'd want to do is on the south side and the west side is I'd want to cut a path designated here by this green line. Cut a path, that way you can be able to get in there, run your temporary fence line easily, not have to worry about things getting tangled up. So whether you cut that by hand, you get a bush hog in there, whether you get a forestry mulcher and just have them do that single swatch, whatever, just get that open enough that you can easily run fence through. And then you can then put in your temporary fencing. And this can be, again, just as simple as what we have. So just some temporary posts, T-posts, step-in posts, run fence all the way around. So the majority of the pasture fence is actually out inside the hay meadow, just on the perimeter there. And then those 2 lines on the south and the west would be through the thicket. That would allow you to put your energizers, your solar-powered energizers wherever you want. If they're going to be living up on the knoll, then of course the westernmost position there would make sense because it's just closer to the house, and that would make it easier to turn on and off as you need to. One thing interesting about this specific section is it actually has a depression. There's a watershed that comes through here, and there's not a clear defined stream bed. In fact, I believe at one point it was probably purposely cleaned off and made really smooth like you see down in the hay meadow portion, just so there'd be flat, nice, accessible pasture at some point. But with pigs in here, there's a chance they're going to get in there and even form their own wallow. So as that water comes down, the spring dumps into this little watershed. So there's all kinds of opportunity for water there. So they may not even have to transport water or plumb water to this temporary paddock. The pigs may find it and take care of it anyway. Southern Pennsylvania is like West Virginia. There's water coming out everywhere. And you can see the slope here. There's a little bit of slope that from the south that slopes to the north to that little low watershed area. And then, of course, along the hay meadow edge, all that slopes gradually back in to that same wash. So, rough estimate, this is 1.5 to maybe 2 acres. And as thick as it is, you could have as many as 10 pigs living in here through their life cycle and not have a huge, disastrous disturbance to the ground. In fact, you're probably going to want to run another set the next year in that same spot to finish everything off. So this 43 acres just has all kinds of opportunity to bring pigs in, to clear up those pasture edges, to get those brambles and overgrowth all eaten down, and be able to produce a ton of protein for their family. As they move their cattle onto this land, then it'll be a great complement for them to be able to cut hay in some portions, graze, and then of course have pigs on the pasture edge. So as the pigs do their job, they can move those pigs further into the woods, up the southern slope there, and introduce those cows into this more savanna silvopasture area that the pigs have created. It really will become a great symbiotic relationship between hay, cow grazing, and pigs in the woods, all the while requiring very minimal infrastructure and very little input costs. So if you have some of these overgrown areas and you don't have pigs yet, I strongly suggest adding them. It's going to be a great complement for your farm. If you don't own property, but you want to do some farm products, look around at some of the neighboring farmland and see if they have these buffer areas. If you can easily present to them all the benefits of you bringing pigs in, running them on this section of their ground for 6 to 8 months, they may not charge you a dime to lease that land. And you may be able to produce not only great quality pork for your family and your friends, but this could turn into a nice side project where you can generate some income with very little overhead. Well, post a comment below. Let me know what you guys are running into when you see these buffer areas. And maybe out west or in the plains areas, you don't have them as much as we do here in Appalachia. But I'd love to hear what you guys run into and how you deal with it. Well, I appreciate everybody watching. Pray y'all have a great week. Take care.